Proof.
All right, guys, we have today one of the brightest minds in the restoration space, and the Shane train is here. Shane O'Dazier. For those of you guys who don't know Shane, he has built his own restoration business. So he walks the talk, talks the walk. And he's got a lot of really kind of simple, but what I think are amazing ideas on how to grow this business through plumbers. So firstly, that's what we're going to be talking about today is helping you guys get a steady source of referrals, get jobs in the door, and get paid on the jobs you actually do, which, as Shane has mentioned, there are a lot of challenges in this business, but you don't really have to worry about equipment and all these other things if you're not getting jobs regularly, you're not getting paid on the jobs you get. So firstly, my man, appreciate you doing this.
Yes, sir. I'm glad to be here.
But also, just so you guys know, we got a country music superstar in here. That's from a former life. So Shane, let's talk get referrals from plumbers. So let's start with a big obvious question, like why plumbers?
Well, they're the first ones to see the leak before the restoration guy does, right? So if you want to sell countertops, then you probably want to find somebody that sells cabinets, because thing comes right after cabinets is countertops. So if you want to learn how to get water damage restoration jobs, you need to be in front of the people that gets the call before you do. And that's what plumbers do.
Yeah. And a lot of times, obviously we know these owners are getting, or, they're having a conversation of like, well, what do I do about the damage? And then if you got a good relationship with, somebody who's doing a plumber. So let's talk a little bit about the strategy. Like, a plumber's not just going to start referring you out of the goodness of their heart. You have something that I love called the servant marketing method. Maybe you could introduce folks to what that is. And let's get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of how that works. Like, how do you start reaching out to random plumbers and start getting them to send business your way?
Yeah. So, I think the way that I first started doing it was just contacting any Joe plumber that I saw. I think over time, I realized that there is a method to determining which plumbers you want. Some of them want money. Some of them don't want money. You kind of need to figure that out. Ultimately, you want to find out what they want and give it to them. That's what you want to do. But the question is, how do you go about finding that out? So a lot of guys, at least in the early days, or at least for me as well, they either want money or they don't want money. And so it's either, I always use the analogy of the plumbers that want money are prostitutes. They're transactional relationship. And the other ones are the church girls, right? And so what do you want to do, right? Like if you want to get with the prostitute, she wants money, you know what to do. What do you do with she's church girl? So the first thing you want to do is really filter out, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a good girl or bad girl, right? And that goes back to like how you find them. There's certain ways that you know where to find them. If you find the girl on Canal Street at 2 a.m., got a pretty good idea who she is, right? The other girls, you find them at church, a little easier to find out who they are. So it's easier to find out what they want based on where you pick them up. So how you find them is really, really important. Meeting them at PetSmart, not so much, because you don't know. You can do a lot of things from PetSmart. You wasn't at church and it wasn't at 2 a.m. And so it poses a challenge to find out what they want if you don't really know. So it all really starts with picking out the right plumbers, number one. And then ultimately, you've got to navigate the conversation to find out what they want and give it to them. And that will ultimately relate to, even if they want money, they've got pain. If they want money, they've got pain. If they don't want money, then you're going to have something else you've got to deal with, right? But everybody has pain. Ultimately, you've got to find out what their pain is. For me, I think the servant marketing method was the way we went about. I mean, so I was so bad at it, I guess, for a long time that I wound up just begging to help them for anything they wanted, right? And money didn't work with some of these plumbers. Giving them jobs didn't work with some of these plumbers. And I just couldn't figure out a hot button. So I finally just said, like, just give me something. I don't care what it is. I don't care. I mean, if a cat's stuck in the tree, call me. Somebody scratches the front door, call me. Just call me. And so that's where the servant marketing came from. I stopped selling and started to beg to serve. And eventually I started getting calls for one-off things that weren't related to anything that I wanted to do. So I started serving with that. And then that ultimately allowed me to get in the door and figure out what was their regular pain, these little damage programs. And we put one together for that plumber. And then that's what really kind of gave me access to my first large plumbing company, right? And so that's kind of where everything took off. So the idea of the servant marketing method, stop selling, start serving. And you can't be reaching out to them, finding out what's in it for you. You've got to be seeking what's in it for them and how can you serve them. And I think that's probably the key distinction.
Yeah, I'd love to actually hear like it's a little bit just at some of the early stages, if you could elaborate on some of the stuff that didn't work, because I think a lot of our folks can probably relate to that. Is, especially when you're dealing with, as you call the church girls, where you can't just say, I got $300 if you're ready to party kind of situation, where she's looking for, like, I want somebody who's going to actually take care of my people, and they're looking for the right kind of relationship, and obviously like reputation probably being the biggest thing they're thinking about in that whole kind of situation, and some of the things you tried that kind of got you nowhere, and what you learned through that process.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to this. It goes back, you got to start with the right plumber, okay? And you've got to start with the right girl. Like if you spend all your time, we got a coaching program where we tell them, step one, we show you how to find the right plumbers. And it doesn't matter how much detail we go through. We've always got a series of clients that do not watch what we're telling them to do, and then they wind up filling up their CRM full of garbage plumbers. And like, if you want to catch bass, then you only fish with lures that catch bass. So just decide what you want, okay? And then use the lures, the fishing rods, and the styles that will catch bass. And like, this is the very beginning. We're not going fishing, okay? We're going fishing for bass. It's bass fishing. And if you're not careful, you're going to be using catfish bait to catch bass, and you wonder why you don't catch anything. It really starts with deciding what you want first, okay? And so once we decided we wanted plumbers, then you've got to figure out which type of plumbers do you want. Residential after hours emergency service plumbers, those are the ones you want. Guys that have 50 trucks and they do construction installs, those are not the ones that you want. And if you don't know and pay attention to what you're doing, then you're just going to grab any plumber you see. And I would say 50 to 60% of the plumbers that you'll be working on are not, they don't even see the types of leaks that you want to see.
Yeah.
50 to 60% of the plumbers that you're spending your time and energy on, okay, they don't even see what it is that you want for them to call you for. And like, then you wonder why you burn out. So that was the first thing. We spent a lot of time chasing dead end plumbers. And then eventually we figured out which ones we wanted to go after. So we have a concept called shadow plumbers too. There's a lot of guys that operate on Google Maps, like the big boys. And you should know who your big boys are in your market. Those guys are going to take a little longer to penetrate because they have multiple layers of management, right? Shadow plumbers are the guys that work out of their house. Well, the guys that own storefront locations, they're probably getting pestered by restoration guys on a regular basis too, right? Yeah. And so if you want to catch fish, the first thing you want to do is find a fish that hadn't seen 38 lures today.
Yeah.
Find a fish that hadn't been beat in the face with 38 lures. And that's where some of these shadow plumbers come in. So it's a combination of, how do you find the fish that haven't seen a bunch of lures today? That's a shadow plumber. And then what do you do when you get in front of them? I think your real question was like, what were some of the early days? Well, if I didn't say already, let me say it again. I would spend time trying to get in front of a plumber, and they did commercial work more than they did residential. Right. Okay. And then, so if you spend all your time trying to build a relationship with a large commercial plumber, here's what you're going to find. He can't send you a job, because guess who calls the commercial plumber outdoor property? Yeah. It's not the building owner. It's the property manager. And the property manager's already got their pet restoration guys too. So a commercial plumber is not going to be able to refer you the same number of jobs as a residential plumber, because the commercial plumber is not dealing with the decision maker, right? The property manager's already got their pets involved. So in other words, if you want to get commercial work, you got to build it with the property manager or with the building owner, not with the plumber. In residential, it's exactly the opposite. The building owner, the decision maker of the home, is the one that called the plumber. And so that's the reason why targeting the residential guys will work and be more effective for you.
Yeah. Love it. I love the overall insights and strategies too. I've kind of used the analogy before, like, some of the same concepts apply in internet marketing, where it's like, I see people, using macaroni and cheese fishing in the ghetto and going, why am I getting this low quality, shitty work when, you could just as easily fish with lobster bisque in the country club, and that's what comes out the other side of it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of what happens after you've obviously built this for yourself. You've helped a lot of people build this. What happens after you start kind of like tilting the game, where now you've got an army of, a mix of bigger, kind of after hours residential plumbers, some of the smaller shadow plumbers, and you've now built up a network of plumbers who all say your restoration business is the one to use, and they're recommending you to homeowners. What does that look like after the fact? How does that kind of change your business?
So I would say I look at it in phases of growth. So phase one is get to critical mass of any business. So if you're either A, starting a new restoration company, or B, you're bolting a water damage vertical onto the business, you need that division to hit critical mass. as soon as possible. And the critical mass is the moment at which your profit is greater than your expenses. And if your profit is not greater than your expenses, you got a lot of problems because you're bleeding cash. So step number one is reach critical mass. Okay. Usually the internet's probably one of the fastest ways to do that. But the problem with the internet is it's not a warm word of mouth referral, right? Yeah. So our philosophy is get to critical mass, number one, whatever you got to do. And then phase number two, replace whatever you did to get the critical mass, get that amount of referrals from plumbers. Okay. Because that's going to be a more stable, like for instance, when it rains, you're going to get a lot more jobs from the internet. When it rains, you're not going to get more calls from plumbers, right? So the biggest issue with plumbers is it's more steady and it's not as cyclical or up and down. The internet gives you a lot of large commercial jobs too, which is good, but it can also be bad because like a lot of guys in restoration, they have a lot of big ebbs and flows, ups and downs. And that's why residential retail water damage inside of homes helps fix all that. And plumbers is the most stable because a supply line breaks when a supply line breaks, right? It's not dependent upon the weather, if you will. Yep. So your question was, what is it like once you get them? So phase one is get the plumbers. We teach referral trees. We want everybody to have at least 3 referral trees. A referral tree is someone who can send at least 3 water damage jobs to your business inside of 90 days. And so step one is identify 3 plumbing companies that can do that and build those relationships and get those referrals. So that's phase one of the relationship. Phase two is protecting that relationship. Once you start getting, well, let me ask you this, is it easier to get married or stay married?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly.
And so you've got to be able to secure the relationship. Once you've identified the seed or the acorn that's going to grow that relationship, you want to nurture and foster that relationship, protect it. And that's where we put together like 1-page plumber referral agreements. And then so you just got to protect the goose that lays the golden egg. So once you've got your plumber established from there, now you're going to have a much more stable, steady stream of jobs coming in. Once that happens, really what we teach our clients is at that point, they should be pushing anywhere between 50 grand a month to on pace to $1 million a year, right? With a single truck, you can do it with a single truck.
Yep.
And so once we hit that, usually there's some operational problems starting to develop, and either the owner is in the field or in the truck, or so phase one, he's right here in his office, has nothing to do. So we got to get him out of this seat. Yep. So we get him out in the field. Once he's in the chair driving the truck, now he's stuck in the truck, and we got to get him out of the truck. Once we get him out of the truck, now he's back here and he's stuck in the office. So like, it's all about ebbs and flows. Our goal for most of our clients is to show them how to get to $1 million per year of water damage, and then start to build out systems that can scale them out of the workflow so they're not touching the jobs on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if that was really your question or not, but
yeah,
phase one, get consistent jobs and then systemize things after that.
I like the journey. Let's talk a little bit about your coaching program, how you help people to do that and not have to figure that out all from scratch and reinvent the wheel. Like, you know, you're getting them started basically where they can start getting plumbers, you know, week 1 when they join.
Yeah. So we've got like at the moment that we record this, we've got a 30-day test drive, but things change. So that may look different by the time somebody watches this, but like at any point, we've got a core coaching program that's a 4-month coaching program, right? And that's really where we help people develop referral trees. That's our core flagship product program. But most people, we don't take people directly into that. We want to prove to them, we give them like a 30-day sample of our steroids, and then we just give them some of the best stuff that we've ever done and we've ever learned in a 30-day package. So if they have their license, like they're certified and they have a moisture meter and they know how to do a water damage job, then and they're ready to go, then we bring in our 30-day test drive and we show them how to get leads in the first 30 days of their business. And we give them sample estimates and invoices for little small cash pays all the way up to $20,000 jobs. We give them the contract package that they need. It's a 30-day sample. Like if they can't win in that 30 days, then we can't help them ever doing anything. It's really good stuff. And so that's what we start everybody with. And at the end of that, we get on a call and we see if we've got something that'll help them next. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I mean, eventually we do, but sometimes people need to stay right there. But that's our 30-day product is the first thing that we've got ready for anybody that comes in.
Yeah.
So, and if you're not sure, we got a pre-launch program too, that like we walk you through, what does it take to get a restoration up and going? And neither one of those products are over $500. They're all very cheap and have a money back guarantee as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would also add that for most folks, like even your coaching as you know, obviously I know you're not giving it away because you've had to like work hard and earn the skill set. but like we're talking a small handful of jobs to pay for it, and it's a skill that you can use basically, forever in this business as long as you want to be part of it. So it's like, it's a thing that pays for itself over and over. I wanted to pick your brain on the next big challenge, which is obviously like getting jobs is half the battle. And I agree with everything you said. That I think a good restoration company, by the way, as an internet guy, should have both, not plumbers or internet. Like it's like I think there's benefits to having them exist simultaneously. But the other big challenge is just getting paid for the work you've already done. So I'd love for you to just take me in the trenches of what that was like for you, and the whole hard learning experiences, the ebbs and flow of cash flow. If you got just the accounts receivable start piling up, you're wondering how you're going to pay bills, things like that, and what every contractor in this business kind of goes through.
Yeah, so there's two problems you have in restoration. The first problem is getting jobs, and the second problem is getting paid. But they're in that order. So you've got to get a steady income stream of leads, number one. But like I said, we solved the two biggest problems that you'll find is getting jobs and then getting paid. And the reality is this: like we specialize with people that are doing insurance jobs, right? And we help them learn how to build a repeatable system to get paid, right? Insurance companies like to play games. They like to delay payment and deny payment and defend their position. And that's fine. They have a fiduciary responsibility to do that, right? Like they want to pay as little as they can on that claim, and I get it. We just acknowledge there's an elephant in the room, and then we put together a series of things that we do, and we call that our claim control method, right? Like we just show our clients how, like every time that you don't get paid, it's because you lost control. You either lost control of that claim, it got denied because you let your client answer the wrong question, like. Dude, you don't let OJ represent himself on the stand, okay? Like you got to have somebody monitoring what they're saying. Objection, Your Honor. Like he does not go home if it's not for Johnny Cochran. You understand? Yep. And like these insurance companies, they're not asking innocent questions. They know what questions they're asking your client. And I just know this: when your client gets paid, you've got a better chance of getting paid. So our claim control method is meant to establish and control the narrative right up front in the beginning. And our goal is to protect our client from a negative outcome. Okay. And that's what we want to do. Most of the insurance companies, their goal is to drive a wedge in between the contractor and the customer. If an insurance carrier can drive a wedge in between contractor and customer, the deeper they drive that wedge, the more money they save, because they're going to vilify the contractor to the customer. They're going to say that we don't owe that. Those guys are crooks. And the minute that customer doesn't pay you, guess what? You don't get paid that money. Insurance company doesn't pay it. However, if the insurance company pays the customer, or if the customer pays the contractor, now those are costs incurred. It's no longer an estimate, and at that point, they are owed, like they owe that customer that amount of money. Okay, like I guess it's got to be reasonable. You can't charge them $1 million for a $8,000 job, but we're assuming that we're dealing with normal people here, not crooks. Yeah. But yeah. That's really what it is. There's certain things that you've got to be able to do to make sure that you get paid and you protect your client from getting paid. And that's really what our claim control method is. It's a series of things that we do, and it starts all the way back at getting the contract signed, like starting at day one.
Yeah, I love it. As somebody who's worked a lot in like personal injury, I've had attorneys tell me a couple of things. I mentioned this before, but one of the things is, it's the same kind of insurance process. That insurance companies, they know it's a war of attrition. So for them, the longer it goes, the more they know you're like willing to settle, or sometimes like in a court case, evidence disappears, a key witness dies. Like they know the longer stuff drags out, the better it is for them. And as you mentioned, they all the time ask questions. Like I've heard, Joe from State Farm will call you and say, "Hey, Shane, you just had an accident. How you doing?" And you say, "I'm all right, all things considering." And then you get to court and you say, "I'm asking for, $500,000 for my injuries." And they'll turn around and say, "Well, that's funny, because on August 27th, you said you were fine and you were doing okay. So how are you going to say there's all these injuries?" And that call was recorded. And there's basically nothing that happens in that insurance process by accident. And it's all just a big game. And you realize you were losing the game before you even knew you were playing.
Yeah. I mean, they could send you flowers if they want, but they don't send you flowers.
So let's talk about the two big things if you're not getting paid on the work you have is like length of time starts to like really stretch out, and then all of a sudden you're like carrying all this cash flow. And then the second piece is they start to like make the amount of money that they offer you smaller and smaller and smaller. And I would love for you to just talk about how claim control, like, you know, kind of works on both of those things of like the speed at which you get paid and also the amount. Because I know one of the things you guys are big on is you're usually helping folks get an extra $1,000 more than they would had they not, you know, kind of followed your process.
Yeah. So I would say this, like insurance companies will typically routinely try to whittle down the estimate or invoice because that's what their job is. Right. So, and what we teach our clients, we've just shown them there's a different way to write your estimate. There's a different way to run your job. There's a different way to write your invoices that they argue things from a flow chart. They argue the bills from a flow chart and they only speak Xactimate. And there's ways that you can write an estimate, even with Xactimate, that they don't understand how to deal with, or they don't know how to cope with. That's kind of what we do. They're expecting to attack that estimate with Lego blocks, okay, squares and rectangles, and we hand them circles and slime, and they don't know what to do with it when you do that. And so it's still a very itemized, detailed estimate, but it's not using the same codes that they're used to using, right? And so therefore they don't know what to do with it. That's one of the things that we teach. It's almost like a different language to be able to speak it, but it's clear. It's a story-based estimate that makes sense to your client. And in the event that you ever had to go to court, it would make sense to the judge and the jury, right? If you go look at an Xactimate estimate, it looks like lawyer speak. You know, you can't make heads or tails of it. And they do that by design. Okay. They do that by design. So that's really what we do. We teach them a systematic, pragmatic way to write your estimates. And then I forget exactly what your question was.
Just, you know, those two big things you mentioned, the length of time and as well as like how you help with the amount.
Yeah. So the longer they wait, so normally they won't tell you to get started. So as a contractor, I used to say, is this going to be covered? And they were like, we can't issue coverage over the phone. And that was the wrong question to ask. Instead of asking them that, we started asking, well, okay, this is what we're doing. Should we stop mitigation? So asking them to stop mitigation is far different than, is this covered? And that's just an example of my progression as a contractor. Usually most contractors are asking the wrong questions. And then what happens is the customer doesn't want to get started, and that job is sitting there either A, drying up on its own, or B, it's getting molded. But what's not happening is they're not doing the work they should be doing. And that's really where the confusion comes in. And that's where the carrier will delay things for a week or two. And the end result is they wind up saving money on mitigation, which once you know what you're doing, you walk in there, you walk in the room like you know what you're doing, and you got to have a plan. You run the plan works, your customer gets paid and you get paid. And but you've got to have a plan. You got to have a plan. And there are certain jobs that are riskier than others. Like we like residential retail jobs under 10 grand. Jobs that are over $30,000, you're going to have a much harder time getting paid. What's that old joke? If I owe you $2,000, that's my problem. If I owe you $20,000, that's your problem, right? Yeah. And so depending on how big that bill is, the same thing's going to hold true in restoration. Most people are not going to be sitting on 20 grand to pay a bill. They've got a much better likelihood or chance to be able to settle up on an $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000 bill. Does that make sense? Yeah. So a lot of these guys that do $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 water emits, those are really risky because your options of getting paid, the bigger the bill, the lower your options are, right? And that puts the carrier in control. So for whatever that's worth. So to be clear, I would rather have $5,000, $10,000 jobs than one $50,000 job. And that's the reason why.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because you don't have to carry all the cash for it. Love it, my man. So I'll put some links below this. You guys can go to work with Shane. Is there anything else we should give a plug? We should probably give a plug to your YouTube channel. You got the best stuff on there in those two challenges.
Yeah, no, go to the YouTube thing. And if you want to know more, go to workwithshane.com, and we'll be doing a live event later this year. If you want to know more about that, go to workwithshane.com. We'll talk about it.
Cool, man. Appreciate you.